There were a lot of conventionalities used in that speech, a lot of platitudes, but there were some important points that were made. He did raise the fact that the settlements are illegal, but he said the legitimacy of continued settlements. That could be read a bunch of different ways. He did not say the settlers in the West Bank must go, as those in Gaza did 4 years ago. So there's some hedging, but it's the first major initiative now in 7 long years. So we will be tracking this and see where this goes. We live in interesting times. This class is tracking them. So, to conclude, do I think that there can be peace? Well, maybe. If 5 problems are solved first. Number 1, 4 million some odd Palestinians now live in camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, in the West Bank, in Syria, etc. There's a phrase, right of return. Right of return means that Palestinians who fled in 48 or in 67 can return to the land they left. Well, the problem is there are people living on that land now, and 9 times out of 10 they're Israelis. So what do you do about the Palestinian refugee problem? Problem number 2 is related to problem number 1. What do you do about the 260,000 settlers who live in the West Bank? The 9,000 some odd settlers were removed from Gaza, but that was difficult. It was not without incident, and Gaza is not the same as the West Bank. What do you do with the 260,000 settlers? Number 3, what do you do about Jerusalem? The United Nations Partition Plan, UN Resolution 181 from 1947, said that it would be an international city under no single control. Well, that doesn't seem to be likely, so what do you do? Is it a Jewish city? Is it part of the Palestinian state in the West Bank? That's a big issue. Number 4, Israel's right to exist. 2-state solution. Most members of Likud are essentially opposed to this, and Likud right now controls the legislature, and the Prime Minister is Benjamin Netanyahu. Fatah and elements of the Palestinian Authority, such as President Mahmoud Abbas, have signed off on a 2-state solution, but Hamas, which controls the legislature, at least nominally, has refused a 2-state solution, has refused even the possibility of recognizing legitimacy of Israel. And then finally, part 5, Israel's right to exist. Thus far, Egypt and Jordan have recognized formally Israel in 1978 and 1994 respectively, but that leaves Saudi Arabia, that leaves Syria, that leaves Iran, Yemen, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, etc., 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 who have not recognized Israel's right to exist through formal diplomatic recognition. So, if you solve those 5, then I think we've got something. As you can see, it's going to be exceedingly difficult, but it looks as if the next few years we'll see at least another attempt. Whether that attempt becomes successful or not, only time will tell. And that concludes our look at Israel from 1896 to the present day. We began with Theodor Herzl's idea of a Jewish state in Die Judenstaat, the first Zionist Congress the following year. We looked at the British Mandate, the actions of the Cairo Conference and the League of Nations, leading up to the 1947 United Nations resolution establishing an Israeli, a Jewish state, and a Palestinian state. A resolution that was accepted by David Ben-Gurion in Israel, but rejected by the Arab elements. We saw how Israel won that war, and 20-some years later, launched a preemptive strike against gathering foes in Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and won control of the Sinai, won control of the Golan Heights, and most importantly, Gaza and the West Bank. In 1978, the Sinai was traded for peace and official recognition in the Camp David Accords. In 1994, King Hussein and Yitzhak Rabin signed a peace treaty recognizing the Jordan River as the official western boundary between the two countries. Even before the Six-Day War, we saw how Fatah, founded in 1959, had begun the organized Palestinian resistance against the Israeli occupation. Led by Yasser Arafat, Fatah would join with other groups such as the People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine, responsible for the 1976 Entebbe hijacking. Joined with other groups in 1964 to form the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. For 20 years, the PLO was the official representative of the Palestinian people, but following the 1982 invasion of Lebanon and the subsequent exile to Tunisia, there was a power vacuum. A power vacuum that eventually led, in 1987, to the first intifada, the first uprising, the first shaking off. An intifada that would give birth to the Islamic resistance movement, better known as Hamas. With the same goals, ostensibly as a PLO, but an Islamist focus, Hamas and Hezbollah, which was formed in the wake of the 1982 invasion of Lebanon, represented a new, more powerful ideological resistance to Israel. The PLO and Fatah had been Marxist. Hamas and Hezbollah are Islamist. And neither, up to this point, the summer of 2009, have recognized any point of compromise between themselves and Israel. Peace, it seems, may still be elusive for some time to come. It's been 60 years since Israel was founded. In that time, there have been a half-dozen wars. Hundreds of thousands have died. And in some respects, we're no closer now to peace than we were in 1967.